Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. So this time, we're going to be diving into the world of email security.
Oh, wow.
You guys have sent over just a ton of really fascinating articles and reports and advice pieces. You're really trying to get a handle on this, and I don't blame you. We've got some alarming stats about attacks on critical infrastructure. We've got some practical tips on spotting those sneaky phishing emails. We've even got insights from the FBI and NIST. And get this, a whopping 80% of critical infrastructure organizations have had an email security breach in the past year alone. That's from the 2024 Osterman Research Report you sent. And I'm joined by our expert to help break down what all of this means for you. Ready to dive in?
I am ready. You know, that 80% figure really jumped out at me, too. When you think about it, we're talking about power grids, healthcare systems, water treatment facilities, all the systems that really keep society functioning. These are prime targets for attackers. And that level of vulnerability is pretty unsettling.
Yeah, it's not just about stolen data anymore. A successful attack could disrupt essential services. And that affects everyone, not just the people running those organizations.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. You know, people often think, oh, I'm not in charge of a nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm safe. But what about that story that you flagged from the Microsoft security article? Someone lost over $500,000 from a scam email about their office lease renewal.
Oh, gosh.
That's business email compromise, or BEC. And it shows just how these attacks can really hit anyone, anywhere.
Yeah, and those BEC scams are getting more sophisticated. It's not just a quick click this link anymore. It's like they're playing the long game. They're building trust, and they're exploiting situations where you might be, feeling stressed or rushed.
Exactly. The Microsoft article does a really good job of breaking down how these scams unfold. They start with meticulous research to figure out who to target, what their role is, maybe even gleaning some personal details to make those emails seem extra convincing.
Right.
And then it's all about building that trust.
Yeah.
Maybe posing as a vendor you already work with, or even impersonating a high-level executive within your own company.
Yeah, it's fascinating and terrifying how they prey on that human element of trust. And then once they've got you hooked, that's when they reel you in.
Right. They create this sense of urgency. It's like you need to act now, or something terrible will happen. Maybe it's a fake invoice that needs to be paid immediately, or a request from the quote-unquote CEO to transfer funds for a time-sensitive project.
Okay, so before we get too deep in the weeds, let's step back and talk about those phishing techniques. You mentioned earlier, spear phishing, whaling. What else should we be watching out for?
Well, the NIST cybersecurity publication that you shared explains spear phishing and whaling perfectly. So with spear phishing, they're not just casting a wide net. They're specifically targeting individuals or organizations, using personalized information to make their emails seem legitimate. It's like a sniper aiming for a very specific target.
So if you get an email that seems unusually tailored to you, like it mentions a specific project you're working on, or a recent conference you attended, that should raise a red flag.
Absolutely. It's a sign they've done their homework. And then there's whaling, which is kind of like spear phishing, but on an even bigger scale. They go after the big fish, CEOs, CFOs, high-level executives, people with access to sensitive data, or the authority to make large financial transactions.
And speaking of going after the big fish, what really caught my eye was that Forbes article about the FBI's warning regarding compromised government email addresses.
Yeah, that one's particularly insidious. They're using these compromised accounts to send out official-looking emergency data requests.
It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing. People are so used to getting requests from government agencies, and they often carry this air of authority that they're more likely to comply without thinking twice.
Exactly. And they play on that fear of consequences. You don't want to ignore a request from the IRS or the FBI, right?
Yeah.
So they exploit that instinct to follow orders, especially when it seems like it's coming from a legitimate source.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Scary stuff.
It is. Okay, so I think we've sufficiently established that these attacks are serious business. They're not just annoying spam anymore. We're talking about potential disruption to the very fabric of our society.
You're absolutely right. And it's not enough to just be aware of the problem. We need to talk solutions.
Okay. So how do we protect ourselves? What can organizations and individuals do to make themselves less vulnerable to these attacks?
Well, a lot of the sources you provided point to this idea of a zero-trust model for email security. It's a big shift in thinking, but it's essential in today's threat landscape.
Zero trust. It sounds intense. Break it down for me.
Now, basically, it means moving away from the old trust but verify approach. Instead, we need to start with the assumption that every email, every attachment, could be malicious until we've proven otherwise. It's like treating every email as if it were a stranger knocking on your door late at night. You wouldn't just open up blindly, would you? You'd ask questions, verify their identity, maybe even call the police if you felt threatened.
Okay, I like that analogy. So how do we apply that to email security? What does asking questions and verifying identity look like in the digital world?
Well, there are a few key strategies. First, we need to move beyond just scanning for known threats. Blacklists and traditional antivirus software are helpful, but they're not enough. Attackers are constantly finding new ways to bypass these defenses.
So what else can we do?
Well, the Osterman report highlights some promising technologies that can help us move toward that zero trust model. One that really stood out to me is called content disarm and reconstruction, or CDR. Think of it like a virtual bouncer for your inbox.
I like where this is going. Tell me more about this virtual bouncer.
So it works by taking any incoming files, like documents or spreadsheets, and stripping away any active content that could be malicious. Think macros, embedded scripts, things like that. It's essentially sanitizing the file, removing anything that could potentially cause harm.
So it's like taking apart a suspicious package
Yeah,
and removing anything that could be a bomb.
exactly. And the best part is, it doesn't affect the functionality of the file itself. You can still open, edit, and share the document as you normally would, just without the risk of hidden malware.
Okay, that's impressive. What other tools are out there?
Another powerful technique is real-time URL analysis. So instead of relying on those outdated blacklists, every link in an email is scrutinized at the time of click. Even if a link looks safe at first glance, it gets reevaluated right before you open it, ensuring that you're not being redirected to a malicious website.
So it's like having a bodyguard who checks out every door before you walk through it.
That's a great way to put it. And this is especially effective against those attacks that rely on what's called post-delivery weaponization. That's where a link might seem harmless when the email is sent, but then later redirects to a dangerous site.
Yikes. That sounds like a minefield waiting to explode.
It can be, but with real-time URL analysis, we can significantly reduce that risk. And then there's anomaly detection, which we touched on a little bit earlier. This involves using artificial intelligence and machine learning to spot unusual patterns in email communications.
So it's like having a detective on the case, constantly looking for clues that something might be amiss.
Exactly. It might notice that your boss usually emails from their phone, but suddenly you get a message from them with a different IP address. Or it might flag an email with an unusual sending time, or an unexpected attachment type.
Okay, that's pretty cool. But even with all of this fancy technology, I have a feeling we can't completely automate our way out of this problem, can we?
You're absolutely right. Technology is only one piece of the puzzle. Even the most sophisticated systems can't replace human vigilance. We need to empower users to be the first line of defense.
So we're back to user training again. I'm sensing a theme here.
It's unavoidable. And for good reason. The best technology in the world won't help if someone clicks on a malicious link or opens a dangerous attachment.
I guess that makes sense. But isn't it kind of a losing battle? People are busy, they get bombarded with emails all day long, and it's easy to make mistakes.
It's definitely a challenge, but it's not impossible. It's about creating a culture of security awareness within the organization. We need to move beyond those generic "don't click on links" warnings and make security training engaging, relevant, and even a little bit fun.
Fun, security training. Are we talking escape rooms and puzzles here?
Maybe. There are definitely creative ways to approach it, but more importantly, we need to show people why it matters, connect it back to their everyday work and their personal lives.
So instead of just telling them not to click on suspicious links, we need to explain why that's so dangerous.
Exactly. Show them real-world examples of what can happen. Talk about the impact on the organization, but also the potential consequences for them personally.
So remind them about that story of the person who lost $500,000 from a BEC scam related to their office lease.
Yes.
Yeah.
Make it real, make it relatable, and make it clear that they have a role to play of protecting themselves and the organization.
And what about those 10 tips for detecting phishing emails that were in that logarithm infographic that you mentioned?
Those are a great starting point. But we need to go beyond just listing the tips. We need to help people understand the psychology behind these attacks and how to apply those tips in real-world situations.
So it's not just about memorizing a list of rules, it's about developing critical thinking skills and the ability to spot those subtle red flags.
Precisely. And the more we can do to empower users to make smart decisions, the stronger our overall security posture will be.
Okay, I'm starting to see the light here. We need a multifaceted approach. Technology is important, but so is user education and a culture of awareness.
You got it. It's about building a strong defense layer by layer, so that even if one layer fails, we have others in place to catch the attack.
That's reassuring. But I can't help but feel a little overwhelmed by all of this. It seems like an uphill battle. What makes you optimistic that we can actually win this fight against cybercrime?
Well, for starters, it's encouraging to see that international law enforcement agencies are taking this threat seriously and making progress in dismantling these criminal networks.
You're talking about that Interpol operation mentioned in the Forbes article, right? Operation Synergia II.
That's the one. They disrupted a massive phishing and malware network that was operating in 95 countries.
Wow, that's incredible. It's a reminder that this isn't just a problem for individual organizations to solve. It requires a global effort.
Exactly. And seeing that level of collaboration and commitment from law enforcement is a sign that we're moving in the right direction.
Okay, that does give me some hope. But I'm curious, with all the risks and the increasing sophistication of these attacks, are organizations taking this threat seriously enough?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, the answer is a bit mixed.
Oh no, what do you mean?
Well, despite all the talk about BEC and the high-profile breaches we've seen in recent years, many organizations are still struggling to get their act together. The Mail Moto article you shared highlights some pretty alarming statistics.
Okay, hit me with those stats. What are we looking at here?
Well, a surprisingly large number of organizations simply lack confidence in their email security posture. And even more concerning, many aren't fully compliant with relevant regulations. It's like they're burying their heads in the sand, hoping that the problem will just go away on its own.
But that's just wishful thinking, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the reasons for this lack of preparedness vary. Some organizations might be underestimating the risk, while others might be overwhelmed by the complexity of the problem.
It can feel like a moving target trying to keep up with the latest threats.
Absolutely. And then there's the resource issue. Some organizations might simply lack the budget or the expertise to implement effective security measures. But whatever the reason, the consequences of inaction can be devastating.
So what's the takeaway here? What's the message we need to be sending to organizations?
The message is simple. Wake up. This is not just an IT issue, it's a business risk that needs to be addressed at the highest level.
And that brings us back to the Osterman report, which seems to be packed with insights on this topic. What else can we glean from this report?
Well, one of the most striking findings is that despite the high rate of email security breaches, many critical infrastructure organizations still haven't fully embraced that malicious until proven innocent mindset we talked about earlier.
Which, as we've established, is a problem.
A big one. The report shows that more than half of the organizations surveyed either assume that email messages and files are benign by default or try to operate under the flawed assumption that they can be both benign and malicious by default.
Wait, how can something be both safe and dangerous at the same time? That seems illogical.
You're right, it is. But that's the kind of fuzzy thinking that gets organizations into trouble.
So it's not just a theoretical concept. This zero trust mindset has real-world implications for an organization's security posture.
Absolutely. The report highlights a strong correlation between the lack of a malicious until proven innocent mindset and low confidence in current email security protections. In other words, organizations that don't embrace this zero trust approach are far more likely to feel vulnerable to attacks.
So it's not just about feeling safe, it's about actually being safe.
Exactly. And the report also reveals that many organizations are missing some of those key email security capabilities that can help prevent these attacks in the first place. For example, a significant number of organizations aren't using content disarm and reconstruction, real-time URL analysis, or anomaly detection.
Those were the virtual bouncer bodyguard and detective strategies we talked about earlier, right?
You got it. And without these technologies in place, organizations are leaving themselves exposed to a wide range of threats. It's like going into battle without a shield or armor.
That's a powerful image. So the Osterman report paints a pretty bleak picture of the current state of email security, especially for critical infrastructure. But I'm hoping there's a silver lining here. What does the report say about how organizations can improve?
Well, despite the challenges, the report also highlights the aspirations that organizations have for bolstering their email security posture in the coming year. It's not all doom and gloom. There's a sense of hope and a desire for change.
Okay, I like the sound of that. What are some of the specific goals organizations are setting for themselves?
One of the most notable aspirations is to see a dramatic increase in confidence in their email security protections. They want to go from feeling vulnerable and uncertain to feeling confident and in control.
That's ambitious, but it's possible, right?
Absolutely. But it requires a commitment to change and a willingness to invest in the right technologies and training. It's about shifting their mindset, embracing the principles of a zero-trust model, and empowering their users to be part of the solution.
So it's not just about throwing money at the problem. It's about a fundamental change in how we approach email security.
You've got it. And another key aspiration is to strengthen protections against emerging and as yet unknown email threats. It's not enough to just defend against what we know. We need to be prepared for what we don't know.
So it's about building a resilient email security posture that can adapt to the constantly evolving threat landscape.
Exactly. It's a tall order. But given the stakes, it's worth the effort.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Before we move on to the Osterman Report's call to action, let's quickly recap what we've learned so far in this deep dive.
Let's do it. We've explored the growing threat of BEC and other phishing attacks, especially those targeting critical infrastructure, and how they can disrupt essential services.
We also talked about that alarming statistic that up to 80% of critical infrastructure organizations have experienced an email security breach in the past year.
We then dove into the common phishing techniques used by attackers, from spear phishing and whaling to the use of compromised government email addresses.
And we explored the different types of BEC scams and how attackers build trust before striking.
We then shifted gears to discuss practical advice, like those 10 ways to detect a phishing email, and emphasize the importance of user training and awareness.
We also explored the technical side of things, like email protocols, encryption, and authentication.
And we talked about the importance of that zero-trust model for email security, and highlighted strategies like content disarm and reconstruction, real-time URL analysis, and anomaly detection, our virtual bouncer, bodyguard, and detective.
We also touched on the success of international law enforcement efforts in combating cybercrime, like that Interpol operation.
And we wrapped up by examining the aspirations that critical infrastructure organizations have for improving their email security in the coming year.
It's been quite a journey. It's clear that email security is not just an IT issue. It's a business risk that needs to be addressed at all levels of an organization.
I couldn't agree more.
So I'm ready for that call to action. What does the Osterman Report recommend that organizations do to address this growing threat?
The report's call to action is pretty powerful. It really stresses that protecting critical infrastructure means going beyond simple detection and response. We need to prevent and preempt these email threats. It's a whole new ballgame.
So not just playing defense, but going on the offensive.
Precisely. You know, the old ways of simply reacting to attacks aren't cutting it anymore. The report is very clear. Critical infrastructure organizations need to embrace that zero-trust model we've been discussing. Assume every email is guilty until proven innocent.
So I'm sensing this is more than just tweaking a few settings or installing a new piece of software. This sounds like a fundamental shift in how these organizations approach email security.
You're absolutely right. It's about building a multi-layer defense system that combines cutting-edge technology with a vigilant and well-trained workforce.
Okay, so back to those layers. We've talked about content disarm and reconstruction, real-time URL analysis, and anomaly detection. What else needs to be in place?
Those are all crucial tools, but they're just the beginning. User training is absolutely paramount. Everyone from the CEO to the intern needs to be equipped to recognize and respond to phishing attacks. And it can't just be a one-time thing either. This training needs to be ongoing, keeping pace with the attackers' ever-evolving tactics.
I can see how this is a cultural shift as much as a technological one. It's about creating a culture of security awareness, where everyone feels empowered to be part of the solution.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about compliance. Organizations need to make sure that they're adhering to all the relevant regulations and industry standards. For email security, it's not just about checking boxes. It's about implementing best practices that genuinely reduce risk and protect sensitive information.
So this is a continuous process, not a one-and-done fix.
Exactly. Email security is like tending a garden. It requires ongoing care and attention. We need to constantly monitor, evaluate, and improve our defenses, always anticipating what the attackers might do next.
That brings up an interesting point. Earlier, you mentioned the potential real-world consequences of a successful email attack on critical infrastructure. I think it's worth diving a bit deeper into that. You know, we've talked about data breaches and financial loss, but what are the wider implications for society as a whole?
The potential fallout is truly sobering. You know, imagine a hospital systems going down in the middle of a surgery, or a power grid failing during a heat wave. We're talking about disruptions to transportation communication, even access to clean water. the consequences could be catastrophic.
It's a stark reminder that this isn't just about protecting data, it's about protecting lives. It's about ensuring the stability and safety of our communities.
Exactly. And it highlights the interconnected nature of our world.
Yeah.
A seemingly isolated cyber attack can have ripple effects that are felt far and wide.
Okay, that's a powerful message to end on. Any final thoughts for our listener before we wrap up?
I think the most important thing to remember is that we're not powerless in the face of these threats. There are steps we can take, both individually and collectively, to make ourselves less vulnerable. Stay informed, be vigilant, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
I love that. A sense of empowerment, not defeat. Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from the alarming statistics to the practical tips, and the call for a collective shift in mindset.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
To our listener, thanks for sharing your sources and entrusting us to guide you through this complex and ever-evolving issue. We hope you feel better equipped to navigate the world of email security.
Remember, staying informed and being proactive is your best defense.
Until next time, stay safe out there in the digital world.
All right, so the Osterman report recommends that organizations need to really kind of tackle this email security challenge head on. And they need to protect that critical infrastructure. And it means going beyond simple detection and response. We need to prevent and preempt these email threats.
So it's not enough to just kind of play defense anymore. We have to go on the offensive.
Precisely. The old ways of simply reacting to attacks just aren't cutting it anymore. The report is very clear on this. Critical infrastructure organizations really need to embrace that zero trust model that we've been talking about. Assume every email is guilty until proven innocent.
I'm sensing a theme here. This seems like a really big shift in mindset for a lot of these organizations.
It really is. It's about building a multi-layered defense system that combines that cutting-edge technology with a vigilant and well-trained workforce.
Okay, so back to those layers. We've talked about content disarm and reconstruction, real-time URL analysis and anomaly detection. What else needs to be in place?
Well, those are all crucial tools, but those are just the beginning. User training is absolutely paramount. Everyone from the CEO to the intern needs to be equipped to recognize and respond to these phishing attacks. And it can't just be a one-time thing either. This training needs to be ongoing, keeping pace with the attacker's ever-evolving tactics.
Yeah, I can see how this is a cultural shift, as much as a technological one. It's about creating that culture of security awareness, where everyone feels empowered to be part of the solution.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about compliance. Organizations need to make sure that they're adhering to all of the relevant regulations and industry standards for email security. It's not just about checking boxes. It's about implementing those best practices that genuinely reduce risk and protect that sensitive information.
So this is a continuous process, not a one-and-done fix.
Exactly. Email security is like tending a garden. It requires that ongoing care and attention. We need to constantly monitor, evaluate, and improve our defenses, always anticipating what those attackers might do next.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from those alarming statistics to those practical tips, and the call for that collective shift in mindset.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
To our listener, thanks for sharing your sources with us and entrusting us to guide you through this complex and ever-evolving issue. We hope you feel better equipped to navigate the world of email security.
Remember, staying informed and being proactive is your best defense.
Until next time, stay safe out there.